said, my name is Sally Sue Richmond, and I'm sorry I'm constrained to here, but I'm wired, and I'm afraid if I move around I'm going to trip, so I'll just have to stay here. Thank you for coming to this, because really there are no good controls for spotted lanternfly right now in the United States. There is potential this could be a really devastating thing to Pennsylvania agriculture and recreation. And the single most important asset we have is the concerned citizen, because there's things that everybody can do. So the spotted lanternfly was first came to, it's restricted right now or confined to about 11 counties in southeast Pennsylvania, although it is moving, and we have unconfirmed reports that it's been seen in Delaware and either New Jersey or Maryland. In any event, it is an invasive species that came originally from China. It migrated to, or it was taken to Korea, and it's come here. We're not quite sure how, but it first appeared in Bucks County in 2014. Because it is so new in this country, we're still learning its life cycle. We're just starting to get information on our field trials for like pesticides, what treatments, what's effective, what isn't effective, and that is changing constantly. Like I've just had an update from Emily Schwackhammer, one of our horticulture educators with the county extension in like December, and we talked about last week, and there's a couple of things that I learned. So it's changing rapidly, and because of that, to find out more or the latest information about it, the fastest way, because the URLs are, writing them down is hard. So if you just Google spotted lanternfly and PDA for Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, or PSU for Penn State, Penn State, you'll find there's a whole web page is dedicated to that. There's no need to take notes if you don't want to. I have handouts that cover all of this information, and your door prize for coming to this is you get your very own spotted lanternfly scraper. Jeez. Well, it's nice because you can't squish the egg masses with your hands, but it makes this distinctive squishy kind of sound, and some people don't like that. So, like I said, no muss, no fuss. Okay, so this is the pictures of it. How many people have seen it? Okay, so where are you from? The ones that have seen it? What towns?
Upper Hanover Township.
Okay.
Phoenixville, down.
You've seen it in Phoenixville?
Yeah, we're starting to see it.
Reading area?
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Southern Chester County, Cochranville area.
Where?
Cochranville.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm from this area, so I don't know. Somebody else I saw over here.
I'm from this area, Montgomery County.
Okay, yeah, right. So it started in Berks County, it is migrating down, and this is all of Montgomery County and 11 counties in southeast Pennsylvania are under quarantine, which we all as citizens or residents have responsibilities, which I will get to. And then if you are a landscaper or anybody that might work with like tree work or bringing materials out to maybe landscaping supply or anything like that, Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture is instituting a permitting program where you have to have some education. There's a hang tag. This is for commercial, not for residential. But if you know of anybody, you might want to let them know they should contact the local Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture contact, and I can either give you that information or just remember my name, and you can email me later. Anyway, so this is the adult spotted lanternfly. They're very distinctive when the upper left, very distinctive when their wings are open. However, most of the time their wings are closed, which is the large one on the right, and they blend in quite nicely with bark. You really, at first, don't notice them. They're about this big. So there, and so as you can see, they've got the spotted backs, and then when the wings, it's actually their back legs or the back part of their wings that have that distinctive red, and it is just like, you can't believe there's that part of color in nature. So it was discovered in Berks County. It's an estimated arrival based upon the egg masses. Entomologists looked at some of the existing dried egg masses, was 212. It's native, actually from China. Somebody asked me where it came from. Originally it's from China. It was recently introduced, so it is an invasive in South Korea. So it came from there. And the reason why we know that, we have had it in here, and we've been able to study it long enough to do DNA sampling. There is a researcher and entomologist from Penn State that currently is in China looking to see what kinds of natural predators, natural pathogens. Because when something is not invasive, there are checks and balances. There's pathogens, there's predators, and things kind of balance out. So when you have an invasive or something new introduced to an area, it's like, woohoo, nothing's here to bother me, and they go crazy. Over time, then the life in this area, pathogens, predators, or whatever, go, hey, these spotted lanternflies are pretty good to eat, and things eventually will balance out. That's probably like 10 years that typically that cycle takes. And in the meantime, these things can cause a lot of damage. So thank you again for coming out, because you are the line of defense. So it feeds on, we've observed it feeding on up to 70 plants, including grapes, apples, as you can see the list here. The preferred host is the Ailanthus altissima, or tree of heaven. If you go down 422 and you look at the trees, scruff trees growing on either side of it, you'll see two things. You'll see invasive junipers and invasive tree of heavens. It's just all the way down that corridor. It does seem to prefer the black walnut, that's where I see it most often, and hops plants. So we need to keep that in mind, those particular plants. One of the things is that people, I started doing hotline calls in the summer specific to spotted lanternfly. And one of the things people said is like, oh, it's on my birch tree, it's on my maple tree, not the ones that I'm listing here. And what we think is, we haven't definitively established this, but what we think is that it can feed on a number of trees, but it needs the tree of heaven to actually lay eggs. So if that's the case, that really does give us a leg up on things. But we haven't actually established that firmly yet. It's just based upon observation of the different entomologists.
So, okay, how soon after mating do they lay their egg?
They lay their eggs in October. I don't know when they mate.
Okay.
Okay, so.
Because we don't have those trees on our property, but, you know, I'm out there scraping egg masses because we have the bug.
Yes.
That's why I was wondering.
Right. It's on my time and management chart. That's typically not one of the questions I get, so I
Okay,
don't have that one
just
memorized.
wondering.
One of the things that I do have in the packet of materials you'll get is a little one-pager time of year management, because what we do depends on the time of year that it is. And that's all laid out for you. Because this is not class, even though it looks like a classroom, and there's no quiz at the end. Okay, so this is the underside of it. It has piercing, sucking mouth parts. If you look at the beak, it's hard to see at first, but looks like a little straw going down. Do I have a pointer on this? Can you see?
Yeah.
Okay, oh, excellent. So this is, and what happens is, in a way, it's kind of cool. It flips out to be in front of it, and it actually drills into a tree, and it feeds off the sap of the tree. It does not eat leaves. It feeds on the sap of the tree. And what happens is it has inefficient digestion. So what it excretes is what we call honeydew. Basically, it's bug poop. Sorry. And it's very sugary. So what happens is, here's some here at the base of the tree. So what happens is that honeydew, it's very sweet. So other insects are attracted to it. I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. And then the sugary substance favors this black mold that is just very unsightly. And eventually the mold, if it gets bad, mold and fungus doesn't usually smell good. So if that's like right by an area where you like to hang out, that can be not fun. Yes?
So it's the black sooty stuff that then takes over the maples. Is that then what kills?
No. Actually that stuff doesn't really hurt the trees. What hurts the trees is having thousands of these little insects drilling holes into it and the sap dripping out.
Stealing food.
And it weakens them, so then they are more susceptible to other pathogens, other insects, things of that nature. And typically what we're seeing is if it's heavily infested, 2-3 years, depending on the health of the tree, before that starts to be infested with the spotted lanternfly. If it's a really healthy tree, it might be able to last longer than one that's already compromised or stressed. But they do eventually die. So here's them down at and if you look at that picture, you can see they blend in pretty well. If you're not looking for them, you're not likely to see them. So here they are again. It excretes that honeydew that's very sugary. So now you'll see that there's yellow jackets or wasps are attracted to that. They are not attacking the spotted lanternfly, unfortunately. So again, if you have a tree that they have invaded and it's near, like some of the people have told me, it's like their back porch. They used to like to hang out in there, and by like September, October this year, they just said they couldn't sit there.
Has anybody? I had a no in the fall when I asked this question. Anybody found anything that likes to eat them?
Yes, there are. It's actually a myth that there's nothing here that likes to eat them. It's just there's nothing that specializes in eating or infecting spotted
What's feeding
lanternflies.
on birds?
No, birds don't. I have some slides coming up on that,
Cool.
so thank you.
Cool.
Thank you for asking them, because you reminded me I need to mention these things. Okay, so this is why it's so important, because if you see, well, you might not know this, Pennsylvania is the #1 exporter of hardwoods. This is a huge business for Pennsylvania. Apples and peaches were the 4th largest producer in the United States. Grapes, who would have thought that? We all think California, right? We are not just grapes for eating, but also for wine. There's a lot of local wineries if you think about it over in this area. In addition to that, I got some additional statistics that I wanted to share with you. Pennsylvania is 3rd in the U.S. in terms of the number of state parks. We're right after Alaska and California, so of course tourism and ecotourism is an important part of our economy. There's also, it's a big draw for tourism, which again is good for our economy. And Governor Wolf introduced the PA Preferred Brews branding program. There's a lot of microbreweries around here. So that's, and again, people that can draw people in residents of Pennsylvania, but people from outside the area. And if you remember on a previous slide, one of the things they like to feed on is hops. So this is not just a nuisance. By the way, they don't bite people and they don't have any kind of disease that will infect pets or humans. So that's good news. So that, but we can see this could be devastating for Pennsylvania. One of the things that we want to do is contain the spread of it. And I'll talk about things that we all should be doing to keep it at least localized to this area until we find better controls for it. There are some controls. It can be managed, but over time as we learn more, we're going to be able to manage it better. So as you can see, yes?
Is southeastern Pennsylvania the sole outbreak area?
Yes, they are unique too. They were introduced in first found in Berks County in 2014. They've now spread to about 11 counties, and actually we think they're starting to encroach into the other states. But we do want to try to confine that, and I'll have when I talk some slides coming up talking about what we need to look for and what we can do. So again, you can see they migrated. This is from just the summer, the 2017, local. All of the spotted lanternflies. So notice they're not on the leaves aren't chewed up, they don't attack the fruit directly, but they keep sucking the sap out of the tree, and trees, that stresses them after a while. Also, this is on a grapevine. So, as I said, we know that they go after the grapes, they go after the apples. Those are important crops for Pennsylvania. And I love the fact that we can get local apples in the fall. They're so good. I would hate to do that. This is a tree of heaven, the dead one here, that was stressed after 2 years. So eventually it will kill the tree. This is black walnut sapling, and as you can see here, these are the 4th stage nymphs. I've got some other pictures of these so you'll be able to recognize them. A sapling, and you can see they're quite heavily laid in there. Another sapling. So here you can see, now they aren't eating the leaves, but because they're sucking the sap out of it, that stresses the whole plant. The leaves are yellowing, and eventually this sapling will die. Might not get to be a tree. Another one. Sometimes they congregate. We've observed them congregating kind of on the ends of branches. We're not sure why. My guess would be maybe it's easier to pierce because it's usually a little softer, the bark. But in any event, you can see here, this dead branch, this is a black walnut, they tended to congregate on that, and then you see some branch die off. At this point, is the tree going to die? I don't know. You would cut the dead part off if you treat it, and I'll talk about ways that you can treat it even after you see it in the station. It's very possible the tree can be saved. I get that question a lot, one of the calls. They're like, oh, I love my maple tree and I don't want to lose it. Is it going to die? And it's like, well, I don't know, but here's things we can do to help it increase its chances. So this is our detection survey. What we do is there's different places throughout Pennsylvania. We either have people that we work with vineyards a lot of times where they actually go out and inspect and look to see the presence of the spotted lanternflies. So the red dots indicate where they have actually been spotted. The green dots are places where they've looked for them and as of November hadn't found any signs of them. So this was just to show you a little bit of the growth. In the fall of 2014, it was Pike and District. Those are townships. That's all in Berks County. Washington, Bechtelsville, Hereford. I love that name, Hereford Township. Rockland. So that's where it was localized in 2014. Fast forward to September of 2017, 3 years later. You can see a lot more towns, and this is the quarantine area. They were observed in the PDA. Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture quarantined the area, and I will explain that in a bit. So you can see it spread to much more, but we're still looking at townships. Now, September of 2017, to November of 2017 because we started observing them in a much greater area. So you can see all of those counties are under the quarantine. And what I did to maybe give a better scale of it, what I did here, so you'll see the red here, because these aren't to scale, so it's hard to see what the growth or the spread is here. And again, it's not to scale. So I overlaid them. So this is the red when it was first in 2014. This was September of 2017, and then the blue area is November of 2017. So unfortunately, the spread is starting to be more rapid, which makes sense. It's a bigger area. So if you're interested, there's an interactive map at the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. Again, just Google spotted lanternfly PDA, and there's a wealth of information, and there's a link to this interactive map. You can type in a township, you can type in a specific address, and it'll tell you what insects have been, including spotted lanternfly, have been observed in that area. So if you want to know, if you haven't seen them and you go, geez, maybe they're there and I don't know it, this is one way that you could check it out. Was there a question, or somebody just moved? Okay, good, people are still alive. Okay, so what does the quarantine mean? It means that no one may intentionally move viable life stages of the spotted lanternfly. Viable means egg masses, nymphs, and I'll have photos of all of this, and the adults. They like to lay their eggs on anything horizontal or vertical. They do lay a lot of them on tree trunks, but we've observed them, and again, I have photos to show this on all sorts of surfaces, and especially including cars. And cars may be parked under trees, and trees may have adult spotted lanternfly females that will lay their egg masses on them. They're small. The egg mass is the one I saw. The last one I saw, this park where I walk my dog now knows this is the tree where Mommy goes crazy and starts kicking the tree because there's all these spotted lanternflies, and I just go every day. Well, they're gone now because they die in the cold. Looking at all the pictures, of course, we blow them up so that you can see them clearly. And when I first saw it, I was surprised. It's only about that big, the egg mass.
So they do look like the picture, but I went out to all my trees, and I got a lot of trees. And they're hard to find because they're very small.
They're small, and they do blend in. And like I said, I have photos of all of this. And again, this is also in the packet that I'm going to give out. So it may, as I said, go in. You're moving. Maybe you've got some lawn chairs. You're moving them to, you're going up to the Poconos. You have trailers. This is why with landscapers they have to be very careful of it. RVs, your car, it's got egg masses on it. You drive someplace else, and that's how the spread of it happens. So that's why it's quarantined. What does that mean? You probably have heard, like if you camp in any of the state parks, they'll tell you do not bring in firewood. This is one of the reasons why. Because unless you burn it completely before the eggs have time to fall off and go someplace else, then you can spread it that way. That's also true for a lot of invasives. That's why the state DCNR does not ask you not to bring wood in from other areas. So it can be nursery stock. It could be because nurseries, that comes in for other areas, even though they might not have spotted lanternfly where you are. I haven't heard anybody in King of Prussia telling me they've seen them yet, but it could possibly be. So you get something from a nursery that was from up in Berks County. If it's got the egg masses, boom, then you've got it in here. So this is why when you go to move any of this stuff, you're supposed to, according to the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, inspect all of this. And again, I have photos to help you see what you're looking for to make sure that you don't have any form of the spotted lanternfly on whatever it is you're taking out of the quarantine area. And in fact, there is a checklist to help you. These are the things that you should look for. I have a copy of this for everybody too, because I don't expect you to be able to read that. But it's a checklist, and what we're all supposed to be doing, if we're taking any of that stuff out of the quarantine area, we're supposed to inspect it, or we're asking people to inspect it to make sure that it doesn't have spotted lanternfly egg masses on it. You can actually, it's actually a requirement of the PDA. Now the PDA is not policing it, nobody's going to jail for it, nobody's getting fined for it, but technically what we are supposed to do is fill out this checklist, sign it. It's a legal document, so that if you go outside of the quarantine area with, let's say, a trailer or something like that, and if anybody were to ask you, you can say, no, I inspected it, and here's my document. If you are in a commercial business where you might have inadvertently takes the spotted lanternfly viable form of life out of the area, as I said, there's a permitting program that's going to be initiated this year that you have to go through some training, and you actually have to get a hang tag that you're going to need to put on each one of your trucks. Yes?
I'm curious, how does the average person know they're in a quarantine area?
By the map. If you're in one of those counties, you're in the quarantine.
No, but I'm just saying the average citizen.
Well, that's
Good
one
news.
part of the problem, and that what I ask you to do is, anybody you talk to, make sure they know about that, because the thing that really is hard, I mean, the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture has a lot of things that they need to do. They have limited funding, they have limited resources.
Do you
I
have the
have
local newspaper?
local
Oh,
newspapers.
that's ours, it was all over our local newspaper.
And which one, you're in what area, sir?
The Upper Perkiomen.
Upper Perk, yeah. There, I gave a talk at the Upper Perk Library in Schwenksville, and I'll be giving another one. So a lot of that's that word of mouth. Again, we are really relying on everybody in this area to help control this. No one organization can do it. No one person can do it. And the control, unfortunately, is not a one-shot. If I had pixie dust, we could sprinkle it over our trees and they'd all be safe. I'd certainly be handing it out. It is a year-long control effort. So again, thank you again for coming out to learn about this. So tell anybody about it. We have a lot of resources at those two, again, Google Spotted Lanternfly, Penn State, or PDA. There's all of these materials that I'm giving out to you. You can download them from those sites. This slide set you can download from there. So all of this material. As a master gardener, or Emily, our horticultural educator, we are more than happy to come out and give talks to any organization. So please do get the word out as much as you can personally. There have been some Reading had newspaper articles on it, and I know the local news up there, I think it's Channel 69, they had a thing on it back in like June. But I think if people don't see them or they're hearing somebody talk about it, there's just so much stuff going on, it just goes right out of our minds.
They will.
When you see them, yes, then all of a sudden you're like, whoa. Okay, so there is the checklist. All right, so here's some more. They go through 4 stages, nymph stages, they're called instars, from the time that they hatch. The first 3 stages, they are black with these little white spots on them. They're really tiny. They're like maybe 1/4 of an inch when they first come out. And the only difference between the first, second, and third stage is they just get a little bigger. And this, the time frame for this would be, they start hatching typically in around June. Again, inside your packet, you will have that's the wrong one. The time of year management. Calendar. Very exciting, but very informative. So you don't have to, I mean, again, feel free to take notes, but you don't have to because I have all of this for you. Yeah, the eggs start hatching in like May, June timeframe. They become adults like late August, September, and that's when they start laying their eggs. They lay them through October. They do die. The adults die in the fall. The cold kills them. Does not destroy the egg masses.
No, it doesn't.
No, it does not.
Oh, gee.
If it did, we wouldn't have.
Yeah, we've had a brutal winter. I mean, I was hoping that was
I have a
gonna
picture.
stop.
I have a photo to show you of that. So no, unfortunately, it doesn't kill the egg masses, and I can explain why. We've got some photos coming up. So then their last teenager stage, as I call it, is the 4th instar. You see, they get the red and white dots on the black, and again, there may be ½ inch. That's kind of estimated because I've seen them. So, and that's on looks like a river birch. So this would be kind of mid to late summer. And then you've seen the pictures of when they start to hatch. Here, this is probably, this looks like it's late summer. You can see there's adults and the teenagers all on the same tree, so they're starting to grow into the adults. So to give you an idea of what to look for, and the handouts that I'm going to give you do have pictures up close so that you'll be able to, and your scraper cards too, all have pictures of it so to help you identify. Once you see them, they're pretty easy to identify. So again, here's another picture of, I think that's a spice bush tree, that there can be really heavy populations. I've seen trees where the entire trunks are covered like this. And they're very jumpy. They're called plant hoppers because if you get anywhere near them, they can leap pretty far. Although somebody, when I gave a talk at the library, she said if you start with your hand up above them, they don't seem to notice it, so you can kind of go down like that and sweep them off. So, but they do, because as soon as you hit one, they jump away real quickly, which can either make it fun or challenging to kill them, depending on. One of the gentlemen that called me said, "Oh yeah, my 3-year-old grandson every day comes over, Pop, let's go kill those flies." And he gives him a fly swatter and he goes to town. Every adult you kill, the adult female typically lays 50 to 100 eggs, so that's 100 spotted lanternfly that don't get born next year. Here is the adult female laying the eggs and covering it, and this is why they survive the winter, covering it with this like waxy putty kind of like substance. So if you see that, these are little oval shaped, these are the actual eggs. They tend to, she tends to lay them in vertical rows, very neat and tidy, and then covers them up with the putty like substance, although she's kind of careless about that. Sometimes she doesn't get all of them. So, and again, those egg masses are like maybe this big. They're not, and because when they're first excreted, they're kind of like, as you see, putty, kind of shiny looking. It dries over time, it can crack, so they'll look different. And I have some photos to show you, illustrate that. So here we see an old piece of wood, and see if you can see these little, look like grayish kind of spots. They're all spotted lanternfly egg masses. So again, you have this wood, you're hauling it away somewhere just to throw it out and take it someplace. This is one of the things that under quarantine we should be examining for.
You know, I was disappointed when I searched this past fall, and I was reading about it, and I guess they also are very smart, and they lay them on the bottom sides of things. Rocks, benches, logs. So how in the name of God are you going to get to all
Exactly. Or the trees. Some people, a lot of people, the callers said, well, they're up high in the tree, and you're not going to climb the tree to scrape them. Hiring an arborist or something like that's an expensive proposition. So yeah, I agree.
You're not even going to
but
get one.
remember, everyone that doesn't get born is 100 that aren't going to get born the next year. So it's a matter of, and as I said, we're going to come up with better controls as we learn over time. That's really where the research and the funding, the limited funding that we have, is going to learning about them. Once you learn about their life cycle, you can start looking at good ways to control them. So here's some on the bottom of a rock. And here you can see, notice here, it's not quite as shiny, and it's starting to crack as that putty-like substance does dry out and crack. So again, you could be looking for different looks throughout the year. So here's another one. This is November 2015. So this is what I was saying. Sometimes she's a little lazy, and maybe she doesn't love those children as much as the other ones. Didn't cover them up with the putty. But you can see this vertical, very neat and tidy, this vertical alignment. And then here's some putty that's a bit dried out, so it's cracked and kind of dry, matte looking. So then from November to March, you can see that drying process. It cracks more. So think back to what it looked like when she first started laying them. Notice it's lighter, it's shinier, kind of grayer looking. There's a couple of different looks that we're going for. This was taken in either January or February of this year. This is a birch tree. Emily took a picture of this. You can see these are spotted. Why am I having trouble with that today? Spotted lanternfly egg masses, and she went up and checked, and they're viable. They were not dried out or dead. So unfortunately, sir, the cold does not kill them. However, the cold doesn't kill them, but they're very easy to kill in this stage. You can just smash them, or you can use a scraper and scrape them into like a Ziploc, whatever, hand sanitizer, soapy water, alcohol. Just close it up, throw it out. They're not like Predator, that movie. Or Alien, right? Here's the time of year management chart. And again, what we do during different times of years, and I really want people to understand that. Right now, so far, we've only found some chemical pesticides that will kill them once they get past that, once they hatch. Unfortunately, the studies, the field trials, neem, which is a popular organic kind of solution, was variable, and the insecticidal soap did not seem to be effective at all. So, but don't be spraying your trees now if you decide you're going to go that route, because that's not going to do anything. That only works on the nymphs and the adult stages. Right now, there's just egg masses. So if you think, oh, she said something about when does that happen, what month, don't have to remember, you look at it here. So this tells you what you can be doing for different months of the year. Notice, destroy the egg masses. That's any time from January till they start hatching in May. And then in October, when the adults start laying them, all the way through the year. So that's there. You can destroy the tree of heaven if you have any on your property and you don't like them, and the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture is actually using the fact that they apparently need to have the tree of heaven to produce viable eggs against them through a trap tree kind of program that I will describe before the talk is over. Sticky bands, I'll talk about them. Treat them with systemic insecticides. Probably one of the least effective is when they are adults, is to try to spray them on the trees in the air, because you have to hit all of them to kill them. And if you're concerned about pesticide use, of course, you're spraying it over a much larger area. So there's other ways. There's a tree bark drench, spraying the tree bark, doing a soil drench. There's a couple of other treatments to keep it more localized and contained that are very effective. Then down here it tells you the predominant life stage. So the egg masses are in these months. This is when they're nymphs. This is when they're adults. So you'll have a copy of this to take home with you. And again, if you Google spotted lanternfly, Pennsylvania Penn State, or PDA, you can pick out another copy of it. And please spread that to anybody. They can all get this information. If you know there's somebody, I have lots of these. If you want to take a couple of extras to hand out to other people, please feel free. They don't do any good sitting in my bag. So somebody had asked about, doesn't anything eat them? It's a myth. Some people are saying there's nothing that eats them. There's nothing that will kill them, and that's not true. So if you see here, this is a spotted lanternfly has been caught in a spider web. Here's a praying mantid that's devouring one, and this is a wheel bug that's also got a piercing, sucking mouth part, except it seems to like to suck insects, and that's just fine with us, right? So there are some, but they don't focus or specialize in spotted lanternfly. A lot of times you'll have one insect that really specializes or focuses on another life form for its sustenance. That's not the case. These are just general purpose predators. So when you go to scrape them, I think I've described that. And again, if you Google spotted lanternfly, Penn State, you'll see a video. There's lots of videos showing this stuff too. How to scrape them. You just, as it looks, you just scrape them into a bag of hand sanitizer, alcohol, something like that. That'll kill them. Or squish them. Now, I talked about the sticky bands. Sticky bands are effective for the nymph stages. It won't do anything for the egg masses. It's not effective for the adults. So people ask me, where do I get the sticky band stuff? Tractor Supply. I would expect Home Depot and Lowe's to carry them this year and to run out of them. Yes, sir.
All right. A friend of mine lives up at Ground Zero, and he had the USD, or Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture up there, and they killed all his male or female trees, and then treated his male trees, with systemic in there.
Right.
So he showed me this tape he got that was like about this wide, because he said they can jump. The nymphs can jump. So I'm looking around, and everywhere I go, the tape's like 3 inches.
Yeah, so just put a couple of them.
Is that what you have to do? You have to use the 3-inch, and then what's a legitimate height to go?
I would do at least 6 inches, but a foot's not going to hurt.
Okay.
You can actually use duct tape turned inside out. That'll work if you don't. You can buy a product called Tanglefoot. And apparently that's the only commercial sticky product, some of it comes on the tape that you put on there. Some of them you just get paper or something of that nature. You can get fly paper and use that and put it around there, and anything that's like sticky. There was a question?
If you contact the conservation district, there's actually a tree banding program. Will they'll supply you with everything if you have a Lantus?
For Tree of Heaven, not for any other trees on your property.
Tree, though.
It is true, but if you do contact your your local county agent for Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, and they have funding to do that again this year. Thank you. So they will hand them out, but they are for the homeowners that have confirmed spotted lanternfly on Tree of Heaven on their property. But then you need to treat the rest of them too. The other trees that they're not, the funding just doesn't cover everything, unfortunately. So this is the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture did them. Is there another question?
Yeah, is it a male and female species, or is it just
Tree
one
heather,
sex?
Yeah, there's male and
I don't
female.
mean a tree, the beetle, the bug.
Yes,
Okay, so they have to go to a mating period? Is that on that chart?
I would imagine.
Okay.
But that's it kind of doesn't matter, because that's not an area where you're going to do any treatment other than the nymphs, the adults, the egg masses anyway. So
Well, I was just wondering if you interrupt.
well, that's one of the things that, you're right, that's one of the things long-term that the research is going to try to determine and all. And again, they've only started studying this in 2015. And it typically takes, when an invasive insect gets into an area, it typically takes about 10 years until enough is learned about it, what's effective, what isn't effective, to get them under control. And we're way at the beginning of that, unfortunately. So here are some nymphs, fourth stage, these are third stage nymphs on the sticky bands. And I don't even know what this material is. This must be what the Department of Agriculture hands out. So you can see they do get stuck here, as do some other insects. We've heard some reports of other things getting stuck on them. I've heard it not confirmed a report that a bird got stuck on it, some other insects. So there is that balance against it. Like there's, it's just a balance, and you need to decide if you want to live with an infestation of spotted lanternfly or possibly losing a few beneficials.
Real quick, just to add to that, I actually worked for the Department of Ag when they were
Oh, cool.
found. If you buy the glue from like Tractor Supply, that's a lot stickier than the stuff that you will get from the Department of Ag. And there have been confirmed little
Oh,
burns
okay.
in the stuff you get from Tractor Supply because it's stickier than
Do you think that's a function of how thick the person puts it on too? Because I've worked with Tanglefoot years ago, and you can slap that on pretty thick, or they tell you to put a real thin coat on, but you get a little lazy.
I don't know the
just slap
details
it on.
on the banding.
I was gonna say though, if you are using Tanglefoot, regular oil gets it off. So if
Okay.
you have like a hummingbird, like I had stuck on one of those.
Oh, okay.
I had to wash it off with oil and then Dawn dish soap out.
Thank you. That's, when giving these talks, nobody has said to me, yes, I have actually seen it myself. So
Talk about baby
canola
oil or something?
Canola oil works the best.
What's
So
that?
canola oil.
any
Okay,
kind of
oil.
vegetable oil would
So
probably
you spray
be.
can,
Yeah, I guess
Like
you put it
Pam,
in one of those
yeah.
little mistos.
Oh yeah,
Probably
Pam or
do.
something.
Pam's
yeah.
canola.
I might scare the the poor bird's going to be scared to death.
They're scared to
anyway.
death anyhow, big person holding them.
Thank you. That's good to know. I'll pass that on when I continue to give talks to
It takes it
people.
off your skin too.
Okay, so you'll notice here it doesn't really seem to be very effective against the adults. Although somebody sent me, the Master Gardener email sent a picture of him, and he had adults stuck all over his, so I forget what he used.
So you should take these down once you're out at the NIM station.
Yeah, and
To
you
avoid-
did them, the sticky bands on the time, the management chart, the time of year,
Just
when the
for
nymphs
nymphs.
are out, which is typically from around mid-May until the end of August, beginning of September at the latest. That's when sticky bands would be effective. And yeah, take them off. They don't, throughout the winter, they're not going to do anything. That's when we scrape. Okay, so the field trials that we've been able to do, there are some contact insecticides. These are all the carbaryl, the bifenthrin, the dinotefuran. They're the chemical names. They are all in commercial products that are readily available at the big box store. There is a list in your packet that gives you brand names. We don't recommend any particular brand name because, County Extension, we're a nonprofit through Penn State, and Master Gardeners are volunteers, so we don't recommend any particular type of product. But we list them, the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture did, because why they make the text on insecticide bottles like so tiny that nobody can read them, I don't know. So they put the brand name up bigger. As I said, with neem, there's variable results. Some people have found it to be more effective. Systemic insecticides are ones where you would either do a soil drench, and you would follow the instructions on the label to do that. Probably like around in May would be a good time to start doing that, because then as the nymphs as the eggs hatch into nymphs, they start sucking on the tree. The soil drench, the insecticide goes up through the circulatory system of the tree. That's what they're eating. And I think I have some pictures of them. They literally drop like flies. Another thing that you can do, which is effective against the nymphs and the adults, is just spray the tree bark on the trunk, maybe from maybe a foot down off the ground to maybe like 6 foot up with these same chemicals. And again, as they walk over it, as they feed on it, they ingest the insecticide, and it's very effective. The other thing that Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture is doing, and I think, sir, you said they did this on your property?
No, my buddy's
On
brother.
your buddy's property, right. So the idea here is that the Tree of Heaven, there's a female and there's a male version, and it seems that they need that to produce the viable eggs. So the idea, it's typically people don't plant this tree by choice. It's not one of the ornamental trees that you say, oh, I want a maple, I want an oak, or something like that. However, it's incredibly prolific. So the idea here is that if it needs this host tree in order to propagate, to take out as many as possible, or take out a lot of them, 85–90% of them, and the remaining ones treats with the systemic insecticide. So the idea, and that's why we're calling them trap trees, or the Department of Agriculture is calling them trap trees. So this would be the ones that are going to be taken down. The one with the red X is the one that's going to remain, and will be treated with the systemic. Ideally, it'll attract all of the spotted lanternfly adults, and they will get it. This is like within less than 24 hours after treatment.
My buddy showed me a picture of his, and from the canopy into the trunk, it was variable from 3 inches to 6 inches deep.
Wow. So, as I said, it's very effective. There's 100%, I think it's within 24 hours, 100% death rate of anyone that get on there. So this is effective, and it is pesticide, but it is localized to the tree itself. I've had people call, they're worried about their children, they're worried about their pets, and that's a legitimate concern, especially if you're spraying it into the air.
And the host tree, I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's male or female, they both attract the
Yes,
insect.
yes.
So
yes.
it's your choice whether you want to leave a male or a female.
Well, it would make more sense to take out the females and leave males, because the females are the one that produce the seed,
okay.
and they are very prolific. The other thing you have to do if you take the tree of heaven down, you have to treat the tree stump with an herbicide. They send out these sucker roots, and if you cut it down and
Cut
you don't
down
treat
one, you
it,
got 10 next year.
Exactly. So, and again, people that are really reluctant to use pesticides, herbicides, they're like, well, I don't want to do that. I guess if you wanted to be diligent and mow over that area repeatedly
Never gonna
for
do that.
several years, eventually, I mean, but you're talking, you would need to do that for multiple years before the roots finally weaken enough that they're not going to
There's
reproduce.
probably not a tree more prolific at reproducing. The seeds on the females are so tiny, they float in the air, and it's just, I mean, and I forget the numbers that they produce.
Yeah.
You really want to kill the female.
Well, that's why I said if you go down 422, nobody does anything there, and
Yeah.
and year after year, I didn't know what they were at first, but I've noticed year after year there's
They
just
spread like wildfire.
like unbelievable. That and the junipers, which fortunately don't seem to attract any invasive species yet. Let's knock on that one. Okay, so we're going to use, the idea is to use an integrated management approach. We want to avoid moving them around. We want to remove or reduce the tree of heaven and don't give them the opportunity for the next generation. Mechanical means is the sticky bands, the scraping, encourage beneficial insects. That's just a good idea to do for your garden or your yard in general. Careful use of pesticides. Always read the label. Always follow the directions about personal protective equipment. If it tells you wear gloves, wear gloves. It'll give you all of that. Which ones will work in which areas? Pennsylvania does not require the insecticide label to list specific bugs. A lot of the commercial products do, but it has to list the sites for which it's appropriate. And as long as this label says ornamental trees, then it would be appropriate for anybody's yard. So that's the thing that you want to look for. And I did want to finish a little early in case anybody had questions. So, questions? Yes, sir.
I got two of them. I'll give you one at a time.
Thank you.
You touched on this just a few minutes ago. I see Ailanthus along roads all the time. Does the Department of Highways have a program to help you out?
Not that I know of. The Department of Agriculture, some of the funding that they've received that has been to do the trap trees in public areas. So
I would think that would be a highly effective start because people don't plant tree of heaven in their yard
Yes.
because it's been an invasive species and known as such for a long time. But roadways, along the turnpike, along 422,
right.
I would think it'd be a really effective program to get the Department of Highways involved with.
Yes, that's a really good point, and I will pass that along. As I said, I know the Department of Agriculture is seeking to do that along public roadways and things like that. And we're hoping to, because it's so localized, that's really, the federal government has been having regular meetings where people, the experts get together and talk about what's going on in the spread and things like that. I'm not aware of, and I don't keep up with the funding aspect of it because I can't make an impact on it.
Yeah.
So hopefully we will start to get a little bit more funding. The other thing too, so I've had one woman that called was, she has a large property, it's like 37 acres, it's just covered with tree of heaven. There isn't any funding to help you take them down. You would need to do that on your own. And I mean, I felt really badly for her. If you do chop things down, another question that I get is, what do I do with what I chop down? You don't want to take them out of the areas, particularly out of the quarantine area. But we have found that if you put them through a wood chipper, shipping them does seem to disturb the egg masses sufficiently that they won't hatch. So that's one thing you can do on your property. You can burn them if you want. I don't know if 37 acres of tree of heaven you would want. That'd be one heck of a bonfire.
No, I guess what they've done is they've run out of money. I know my buddy Ray up in Hereford, it was the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture paid for that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
They paid for the, cutting the trees down. They paid for all the tape and all the trap trees.
The funding ran out last year, I believe. I'm not certain that they got more funding this year.
I just read where Congressman Costello arranged for the federal government to give Pennsylvania like $17 million for this spotted lanternfly thing. So maybe the money is coming, hopefully. I was wondering, is there going to be any initiatives, like a central battle plan? Because like I represent the tree commission in Phoenixville, but that's just us. So everything's on our dime, and we don't have the expertise or the staff to deal with it or the funding. So is there going to be like a coordinated?
Well, the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, that would be Dana Rhodes is the person that gave us, just gave us the latest update, and
Sven?
no, not Sven, Dan Baker, I think his last name is.
So they would basically contact government entities and say, here's what you need to do?
At this point, the webinar that I listened to, which was March 1st, I believe, there was not, they're still gripping with it too. It's something that they want to do, which is why we're depending on people. What I would suggest, if you're an organization like that, contact the county agent of PDA and tell them we want to work with you on it. It's like I said, they're just starting to get everything together. Most of the funding now is going into just basic research. What kills them? What is their life cycle? When do they mate? Is there some way we can disturb that? Because we need to know that information before we can start, sending out some sort of concerted effort. So, but no, I know that's one of the things that, like Boy Scouts, we were thinking. So, and don't feel free to just contact anybody you know, any organization. Let's say, hey, do you know about this spotted lanternfly? You can call your county extension agent, the Penn State Ag Extension. Again, just Google Penn State County Extension, or Master Gardener. Just Google Master Gardener, because that's typically over 450 of us went through recent training to be able to come out and give talks to people. And we can't come out to your yard, chop down your trees, I'm sorry, but to go out and give talks and help educate people, answer the phone calls as they come in. So we're doing what we can, and we really are relying on everybody pitching in.
Can you just explain that, what did you call it, like soil trapping or something?
Soil drench, yes. What you would need to do is look at, because I can't give specific directions for a particular brand, you would go and look for one of the chemicals that are that I list in the document here, and it will tell you if it's appropriate for a soil drench. It will give you exact instructions. Basically, you mix a bunch of water to whatever concentration they tell you, and you just water it around the tree, and then the tree just absorbs the
Does that kill all other bugs in the tree?
Unfortunately, it does.
Yeah.
But how many other bugs that would pierce the tree trunk would we consider beneficial? They have to actually pierce it and drink the sap, suck the sap before they're going to get the insecticide and kill them. As opposed to if you do like just spraying the tree, trying to get all the leaves and the branches and all, that does kill indiscriminately.
Mm-hmm. What about bugs that eat leaves?
Well, if you spray the leaves, then yeah, any insect that goes on it is going to be affected by it. Whereas the soil drench, it doesn't go, if they bite the leaves.
Yeah, I think it does.
Yeah.
It will.
Probably.
Yeah. I've been doing it for the ash borer, for a few ash trees. I know it's
Yeah.
detrimental to the others, but I want to try to save the ash.
Typically, it goes up the systemic system, and it's great for boring insects, like the ash borer, which tends to do a vest turn. So they're cutting across, so it's effective that way.
Right.
Whether it gets the leaves and it's effective, I wouldn't know, but
It will get to the leaves because that's part of the circulatory system of a tree, and the chemical will be in there. If it's at a concentration that's going to kill insects, I really don't know. But what we're hearing is that yes, it does. I'm sorry?
But it won't kill the tree.
No, the systemics will not kill the tree. The spraying the bark too, which might be a better way to do if you're concerned about that. If you spray the tree bark down at the bottom, that's not going to be on the leaves. And again, if it's an insect that's boring into the tree trunk, I don't think we consider that beneficial. It's going to do the same thing that the spotted lanternfly does. And that localizes the insecticide to the affected area. You're not getting the environment.
Yeah, given the native habitat of where it came from, what is the potential range in the United States?
Well, given that it doesn't the cold doesn't kill it, I would say the entire United States. I don't know that I've read anything about that, but I know it's going to. From now, the only question I don't know is like in the far south, where it's like zone 9, zone 10, where it doesn't go below freezing all year long. I don't know. Maybe it's too hot there, but the temperatures down there are pretty much like what we have up
It came
here.
from China. If it's in China and its potential range is everywhere, it would have spread everywhere. So something's restricting it from going too far north, too far south.
I think
They
it's
must
just,
have an idea of what its range in China is, and if you extrapolate that to the United States, we can make some guesses on what the potential
not
range in the
necessarily,
United
because
States
there's
is.
areas of China that probably don't have the transportation in and out of the areas like we do. That's a really good point, but I don't know that you would necessarily, it would apply to here because of all the transportation, throughout the counties and things like that, Pennsylvania, going to Maryland or whatever, so.
A lot of times you get East Coast problems that don't get to the West Coast, and the California Department of Ag is real strict about what goes in and out of California. And vice versa. Okay, you got the Great Plains in the middle, but is it going to go up into Maine? The indulgence doesn't seem to be going up too much further. The cold apparently is killing it, various others, and I was wondering about the South as well.
Don't know. It hasn't spread there yet, and I don't think it's because of it just hasn't gotten that far. Right now, it's
Yeah.
there's 11 counties, so
Right.
whether it goes.
So the range of the fly itself isn't great as far as moving on its own, but it's the transportation
Yes.
of the eggs, just same way that the ash borer started, where in Michigan or someplace like that.
Minnesota, I think, actually, yeah, they find out more and more about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true because they move farther than originally thought. At first, they thought they only move like a couple of feet, and we know that's not true. They can move. They fly. The adults will fly much farther away. But if it was restricted to that, it would still spread. But think about it: 300 feet every year, or 500 feet,
Yeah.
300
And
yards
it
every year. It's going
seems
to
to
take
be
a long.
in a wind in the easterly direction, which is the prevailing wind. So, it's the movement of eggs. I think that's when we had a couple decades ago the gypsy moth that transferred, in cars and camper tents and.
The gypsy moth egg masses look really similar to the
Yeah.
spotted lanternfly because somebody said, well, how do I tell the two apart? And my thing was like, well, get rid of both of them. Unless you really like gypsy moths all of a sudden. So, but I mean, I understand if you want to identify them, that's one thing.
If I could interject real quick, it's not a fact, it's just the last thing I heard from the Department of Ag, that in Korea it took about 3 years for them to fully spread. But because of how publicized they've been, that this is probably the most well-known invasive that we have had the most frontline work on from day one, which is why it did not spread as far as it should have if it wasn't as publicized for the public. It's not a fact, it's just the last thing I heard.
And if you think about it, it's only spread to 11 counties in 3 years, given that, the
Compared to
transport. I
Korea.
think that's really remarkable. And again, that has to be predominantly everybody. I mean, we talked about the Department of Agriculture. If we want it not to spread out of the state, are you really going to stop every single car and truck going from Pennsylvania to Delaware and inspect it? So that's what you would have to do. So that's a far more expensive solution than us educating ourselves, checking our own yards, and just letting people know about it. So that, as I said, just as the spotted lanternfly is spreading, we can spread this knowledge, and that's the most important thing.
Do you have any realistic hope that it's going to work?
I think, yeah, absolutely. Like the gentleman from the Department of Agriculture. I'm sorry, your name?
Michael, I was in the entomology department the year they were found.
Oh, okay. Michael, as he said, we've really contained the spread of it far more than would be expected through just some people knowing about it and trying really hard to, contain it and things like that. So yeah, because remember, every year that goes along, we learn more effective ways to control it too. So if we can contain the spread of it, as we learn more, it'll end up just being another nuisance that we have to live with.